Hello, and thank you for joining me online today. Welcome everyone to the first York Circle at Home lecture series. My name is Julie Lafford. I'm the Executive Director for Alumni Engagement at York University. While the world has changed drastically since we last hosted our York Circle event on campus in February, we're pleased to continue to bring you this lecture series in a virtual format during the COVID-19 pandemic. As many of you know, York Circle presents an opportunity to learn from some of the incredible faculty and researchers at York, and we'll continue that tradition today. As you hear from some of the university's leading scholars, many of whom pivoted their own research to study the varying effects of this pandemic and draw from their own expertise to speak to you today about some of its lasting impacts and how to navigate these changes. And even though we can't gather physically, we hope to continue to offer you programming and events virtually so that we can stay connected during this challenging time. First, I'd like to provide an update on some of the ways that York is responding to the pandemic to support our students and our community. The university has launched the COVID-19 Student Relief Fund, an initiative that will raise money to support York University emergency bursaries. This has been established to help York students to cover unexpected housing, rent, food, travel, and other costs due to the pandemic. York's also issued a call for time-sensitive special research proposals with a COVID-19 focus. Funding in the amount of $250,000 will be provided by the university. Additionally, researchers and staff have come together to respond to the call for supplies to help Canada and Ontario combat COVID-19. York has donated over 60,000 medical supplies from the faculties of Science, Health, and the School of Arts, Media, Performance, and Design. Although we aren't all in the same location right now, I'd still like to acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located, and that precede the establishment of the university. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So thank you all again for joining us remotely. Before we begin, I do want to take a quick poll, which should appear on your screen very shortly. And the poll asks the questions, have you ever attended a York event other than this one today? So I'll give everybody just a moment to respond to that. Thank you for participating in that poll. I should have the results for you shortly. All right, so 80% have attended a York Circle lecture before, and 20% have not. So I welcome the 13 people who haven't attended one yet. I'm so glad you have taken the time out of your day to be with us from your home. We do have about 84 people online right now, and I'm sure there'll be more joining us soon. So thank you again. It's great to have so many of you here. I know that some of you may be new to online events, so if anytime you need help with this experience or you have questions about the content, feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and our team is ready to help you. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Pillay-Riddell. She's the Academic Chair of the York Circle Lecture Series and Associate Vice President of Research for the University and Professor in the Faculty of Health. So welcome, Dr. Pillay-Riddell. It's a pleasure to have you today from your home, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Julie. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I hope that everybody is staying safe and well during this time. I never envisioned we'd be doing York Circle at home, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to connect. So as Julie mentioned, my name is Rebecca Pillay-Riddell. I am the Academic Director of the York Circle Lecture Series. I'm so pleased to be able to introduce the first York Circle at Home lecture series this morning. It's things like this where we're using ingenuity and technology to connect us all together that makes me fully confident that we'll be coming out of the other end of this stronger than before. So today we have 4 very timely and thought-provoking lectures and research presentations to share with you. We're going to start this morning off with Dr. Ellen Auster's lecture, Stragility, Navigating Ultradynamic Change at 9:30. Then we're going to transition into Dr. Julia Crete and her lecture, The Genealogical Sublime, at 11 a.m. Dr. Jane Heffernan will be our first afternoon lecturer, and her lecture is What's in a Model? A Look at COVID-19 at 1:45. York University is one of the leading universities, I think, in mathematical modeling with pandemics, so it'll be a really interesting lecture, I'm sure. Dr. Ada Mamuji, Dr. Jack Rozdolinsky, and doctoral candidate Dr. Terry Chu will be giving a lecture, Understanding Lived Experiences During COVID-19, the Chinese diaspora communities in the Greater Toronto Area at 3 p.m. I'm so proud to have been a part of bringing together these highly recognized and respected York professors and scholars over Zoom today to share their research with all of you. As Julie said, while we cannot meet in person due to this pandemic, we're honored to provide a virtual opportunity for all of us to gather and learn from this incredible group of faculty and researchers. I'm so grateful that Ellen, Julia, Jane, as well as Ada, Jack, and Terry could invite us in and come join us from home. I know that you will learn so much from their presentations. Now, I will turn it over to our first speaker, Dr. Ellen Auster. She's a professor of strategic management in our Schulich School of Business and executive director of the York Change Leadership Program. Dr. Auster has more than 25 years of experience as an academic consultant specializing in Stragility, a concept she introduced that is defined as the art of strategic transitions, transformations, and turnarounds. How timely. Dr. Auster has published over 45 articles in academic and practitioner journals and written 4 books. She is a recipient of numerous research and teaching excellence awards. She earned her PhD from Cornell University and has taught at Columbia University, Dartmouth University, and both of which are in the United States. Welcome, Dr. Auster. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that lovely introduction. Happy Saturday, everyone. And I know it's not necessarily morning from wherever you're coming from, because some of you are coming from places around the world. A warm, warm welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm so delighted today to share some of my latest thinking. It's actually brand new content for me around navigating ultra dynamic change, positive spin on the change we're all experiencing, ultra dynamic change. So we'll be talking about some sort of common pain points and also practical action-oriented tips and tools for navigating, strategically navigating even crazy tumultuous change like what we're experiencing now, what we're all experiencing now. Rebecca and Ben asked that I also weave in some personal Stragility tips and tools. So I will be doing that as well as some leadership tips and tools. So if everybody's ready to go, I think let's get started. I'm just gonna work on trying to get my slides up here. Hang on one second. I think my video's on. 1 second. I'm just trying to figure out how to get to my slides. Hang on. Are my slides up? Hello. Sorry. Let me see if I can navigate this. Hang on 1 second. Share screen. Let's see if this is going to work. Hello, everyone. Can you see my slides? Maybe Ben can chat and let me know if I'm on. I'm assuming.
Yes, we can see them.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for that, everyone. This is the first giant webinar I'm doing, so I'm just getting used to it here. All right, so now for some reason my slides, there we go. Okay, let me get rid of this. There's something on my screen. All righty, sorry for that. Okay, we'll dive in. So ultra dynamic change is the new normal that we're all experiencing, and we may sort of be feeling like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. For some reason, my slides are not moving forward. Okay, there we go. Okay, who says, sort of wakes up one morning after that tornado and says, I've got a feeling I'm not in Kansas anymore. She's now in the land of Oz, and her reality as she knew it has been dramatically altered. So we're not in Kansas, but I think most of us would agree, and we don't have munchkins and good witches and bad witches and flying monkeys, but I think most of us would agree that it is a new reality that we're all experiencing. And that reality is this humongous disruptor called the coronavirus pandemic, and all its ripple effects, both macro and micro, right? Our world, our communities, our organizations, our families, and really us individually every day, morphing and adapting to all that's changed. So in this context of ultra dynamic change, and from talking to lots of former students who are all leaders in organizations, I'm from Schulich, so they're, most of them are in the business world, but also all of us every day really are adapting. And hopefully these pain points I'll be touching on are relevant not only for us as leaders, but also us even at home, just trying to navigate life. So the first one I'll be talking about is feeling overwhelmed or paralyzed. I think with all that's coming at us, all of us over the last few months have had this feeling. Second pain point is struggling with reinvention. We're adapting, we're morphing all the time. So how do we come up with the good solutions we need to be able to move forward? The third pain point I'll be talking about is finding team leadership challenging, right? So for those of us who are in organizations or even team family, how do we keep everybody aligned and moving forward in the midst of all this uncertainty? And the last one we'll be talking about is anxious about the future, something I think we've all experienced. So we're going to take a look at each one of these pain points and some tips and tools for hopefully addressing or overcoming them. First one, common pain point is feeling overwhelmed or paralyzed. And the Stragility skill is prioritizing pain points, recognizing our circle of control. So this tool actually is an adapted version of something Eisenhower, one of the US presidents, first used. He talked about urgent and important as key priorities when you're feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's really helpful. So this is sort of an adapted version of that. And basically you've got, sorry, I've got things on my screen that keep popping up. We've got a matrix here, right? With two axes, urgent and important. And in that first upper quadrant, the idea is to first identify and map what are our most urgent and most important tasks, right? These are things, my clicker is not working for some reason. So sorry. Hang on. Okay, sorry. These are things, right? No time like the present. Let's get on them. Let's quit postponing them. Let's figure out how to tackle these most important, most urgent tasks. The next are still important, but a little less urgent. And those we can just sort of schedule time for. So maybe we can push those out. The idea is don't have them fall off our radar, but actually fix a block of time so that we actually get to them. In that third quadrant, we're now on sort of less important, but more urgent. These might be things that maybe are blocking others or just smaller tasks that we need to do. So maybe we can delegate them out or maybe collective divide and conquer them. And the last ones, those less urgent, less important. First criteria is, can we decide just to eliminate them, take them off our list? Or maybe we can postpone them, sort of say, you know what, good thing to do, but really not till after COVID. Or maybe convert it to a quick win. So, maybe it's that nagging kitchen drawer. And when we're low energy some night, we just say, you know what, I'm just going to tackle that and clean it right out. So another criteria, though, to keep in mind, so we have urgent and important, but we also want to recognize our circle of control. So really focusing and investing effort within our circle of control. What are those things that we actually can do, we have control over? And I know for me and all of us over the last 8 weeks, we've all sort of lost a lot of our circle of control, right? And so this is about thinking, what are those tasks within that very important, urgent sort of list that we actually can accomplish? Second is pushing the boundaries on our circle of influence. So think of orchestras and sports events, right? They no longer have control over having stadiums full of people, but a lot of them are putting on virtual concerts and virtual events. So it's in their circle of influence, hoping people will show up, sort of like what we're doing with York Circle this morning. And third is to sort of monitor our circle of observation for shifting conditions. So thinking about, you know what, maybe we can't launch that product line now, or maybe we can't really do that under these conditions, but in the coming weeks, things might shift, and then we'll dive into them. Okay, so let's dive into, so that's sort of the first pain point. It's around urgency and importance and circle of control as a way to sort of overcome feeling overwhelmed and paralyzed. Second pain point, struggling with reinvention. And the idea, the skill or tool is sort of collective solutioning, leveraging opportunities and strengths. So one of the first things to think about when we're trying to sort of brainstorm and come up with new ideas, especially in these ultra dynamic conditions, is to generate ideas collectively, right? Everything's moving so fast. We don't have all the information at our fingertips. Those in our organizations know best how to do things. So the idea that when we're struggling with reinvention, we think collectively first, right? We're collectively working together to try to generate solutions. Second is that divergent word, and thinking about sort of starting with a blank slate. Not trying to necessarily tweak what we've done before, but instead really saying, what's the best idea, best possible solution moving forward? And then third is we brainstorm, scanning for opportunities, both externally, maybe within our industry, but also outside, and reapplication opportunities. Are there bits and pieces of what other people are doing that maybe make sense for us to reapply internally? And as we look for those opportunities, we want to be thinking about what are some strengths, internal strengths and pockets of excellence we could leverage. And I know we've all seen so many great examples of this. Labatt's, right, beer, they know how to do bottling. And so they pivoted very quickly to helping out with COVID and producing sanitizers, right, for our frontline workers. Or Dyson, their strength is sort of small machines. So they pivoted from vacuum cleaners, and I think they also do like hair dryers, to providing ventilators. And Bauer Hockey, right? They make hockey helmets, but they started making medical shields. So these are just great examples of leveraging opportunities and core strengths. So that's sort of our second pain point about struggling with reinvention, right? Doing divergent brainstorming and scanning externally for opportunities and leveraging our strengths. Okay, on to our third pain point, finding team leadership challenging. With everybody working remote and all this uncertainty, we may find that sort of our teams aren't rowing in the same direction. So what can we do there? We're going to talk about embracing emotions and trying shorter cycle action planning. So embracing emotions, there's this great book out this past year called No Hard Feelings, The Secret Power of Embracing Emotions at Work. And I love this visual that they have in the book, right? So kind of historically, what people used to think emotional meant, unprofessional and weak. And sort of not a strong leader. And what being emotional actually means is that we are human. And especially now, I think as leaders, as family members, really embrace the emotions and that emotional roller coaster we're all going through. So some specific examples of how we might do that. And this is borrowed from Brene Brown, who lots of you may be familiar with that book, a great book called Dare to Lead. And I love this quote of choose courage over comfort, choose whole hearts over armor, and choose the great adventure of being afraid. Sorry, my screen is covered up, so I can't actually see what the quote is. There's a little box here. Oh, such a moment. Let me see if I have it written down here somewhere. Here we go. And choose the great adventure of being brave and afraid exactly at the same time. So that's just a lovely quote around sort of unarmoring, right? And letting our whole hearts out. And if something's bothering us, to talk about it. If we're worried about something, to talk about it. To have the courage to say, hey, to our boss even, or to our coworkers and colleagues, or those who work, with us and for us. Hey, you know what? I'm not really certain what's going to happen now either. I'm doing the best I can, and here's what I can tell you. Another principle from Brene Brown that I think is really helpful, especially now, is assuming positive intent, right? That generosity of spirit. So if somebody drops the ball on something, we assume they're doing the best they can. And we sort of check in with them and see how we can help. A last one about that I'll touch on now about embracing emotions is sort of head and heart, and to bring both of those to the forefront. So often in business, we focus more on the analytical side, the head side, but to also bring our hearts. And one cool little tool for doing that I've used even before COVID is head and heart check-ins. So just take our Zoom gallery of team members and go right around the gallery and ask everybody to share a bit about what's happening with their head and their heart. And that might be something like, my head is saying I'm really excited about this new product we're launching remotely, but my heart is a little sad today because someone close to me is struggling with COVID, right? So to just go around our Zoom gallery as we're having our virtual meetings, and it's a way to sort of get a more holistic view of our team, and that helps build relationships and compassion and helps us work together during these difficult times. Another tool more on the head side is shorter cycle action planning. And for this, we want to determine the cycle tempo that really makes sense for us. And I'm borrowing here from Care Guide, which is a startup, actually, my youngest daughter, Shannon, works for. And I heard them chatting about this as they were doing some planning, and I thought it was super helpful. And so thanks to Care Guide, shout out to Care Guide for letting me share this. Care Guide, by the way, a little plug, helps people looking for home care, childcare, and other services. And you can check them out at websites like Canadian Nanny, housekeeper.com, and sitter.com. Anyway, so what they started doing, because like so many of us, our quarterly plans or annual strategic plans may not really make a lot of sense now, right? They're sort of obsolete or not relevant maybe now, is just thinking about monthly priorities. So what does a successful May look like? And having the teams drive that, right? So asking our teams, like, what does a successful May look like? What would be some of the things you were trying to attain? And then sort of making that more concrete through weekly goals and focus. And a tool there is a morning huddle, which we'll drill down on in a second. And then having that translate out into daily objectives, tasks, and really experiments, because we're all running so many experiments now trying to figure out how to do things. And those would be things that team members really own and drive. So I just want to drill down for a second on what a morning huddle might look like. And again, you pick the cadence that's right for your team. Might be once a week, might be twice a week, might be every morning. To start with a bit of a connect, like one of those head and heart check-ins I just mentioned, or even something as simply as going around your Zoom gallery and asking, what did you eat for breakfast? Then to have the teams share their successes, progress, and wins, sort of the head stuff, but also maybe acts of kindness that happen during the week, more heart. Third, for the teams to openly talk about, this is that vulnerability piece, some of their struggles and what's keeping them from doing their best, maybe what's not working, what's blocking them. Then starting to solution and landing on weekly goals and focus, right? What should they work on? What should they pivot? What should they course correct? How might they measure success? From there, taking the lead. Who's taken the lead on sort of those different initiatives we've just generated? What support do they need from the team or other people in the organization? And then a bit of a wrap up and a pump up, right? So just sort of a quick little tool that might help guide a morning huddle meeting. And then during the week, we're doing check-ins and pivots with our direct teams and reports. But at the same time, we want to realize this is sort of shorter cycle action planning, and we should start to think about sort of those farther horizons and block time for that. Tons of benefits of huddles like these, right? Learning, reinvention, clarity and alignment, everybody's rowing together. Lots of communication happening between and across the teams. real-time problem solving so things don't get lost or sort of stuck. It also helps us manage scope creep and cost because there's lots of check-ins that people are doing before taking action. And really, it's sort of a supercharged after-action review that's embedded in daily practice. And finally, we're getting all that social connecting and teaming. Okay, so on to our last pain point, anxious about the future. And I think this is something we've all experienced in big and small doses over the last 2 months or so. And I'm going to talk about 3 sort of more at the individual level tools and tips around be present, capture pull forwards, and gratitude. So this is really about sort of channeling our inner Zen here, right? Amidst all the anxiety and uncertainty. And a simple one is just be present. Sounds simple. It's harder to do, to really just pause when we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious. And there's research on this, right? 45 seconds does amazing things for our body, lowers our blood pressure, improves our concentration and focus, and slows our heartbeat, right? It could be a deep breath, a sigh, or just really pausing to observe the details of something. Maybe that daffodil in our front yard or out our front window, right? The delicate nature of those petals, the sun coming in on the grass, or anthers. See those little things in the middle? I just learned last night. They're anthers, or the anthers in the middle. Another thing we can do sort of to help quiet our anxiety is capture silver linings and pull forwards for the future. And I think there's so many of those that we sort of maybe don't notice as much as we should, you know, whether it's the sound of our kids laughing or our healthier planet. Now that we're not so busy, it's not 24/7 and we're not driving, right? Our planet is actually getting healthier. So there's a silver lining. What can we do to pull that forward, right? Maybe there's remote Wednesdays around the world to just let the planet have a chance to breathe too. Cherished family time, random walks throughout the day, all these things that we maybe have been doing during this time. And we say, you know what, I should really pull that forward and keep that going for the future. And I love this quote from Elizabeth Lesser, right? How strange that the nature of life is change, yet the nature of human beings is to resist change. And how ironic that the difficult times we fear might ruin us are the very ones that can break us open and help us blossom into who we were meant to be. That's a book I've just returned to. It's a book called Broken Open, How Difficult Times Can Help Us Grow. It came out about 15 years ago, but has some fabulous stuff about coping with change that can really help now. And the last one I want to talk about is gratitude. So it's a close cousin of silver linings, but a bit more present focused, is just taking a little time every day to think about, you know, what are we grateful for? 2 or 3 or 5 things. I like to start my morning that way, whether it's the frontline workers who are out there risking their lives every day and their families actually to keep us safe. Whether it's the signs of spring, I don't know for you, but I was so reassured to just sort of see flowers coming up and buds blooming, because in the midst of the chaos, that continuity is still there. Whether it's breath, a hug, and even the fact that we have to sort of physically distance, we can look at that through a lens of gratitude, because, you know, we're sort of privileged that we have the ability to do that. There's so many people in the world, right in our backyard, homeless people, people who have to work every day face to face, people who have to work every day face to face to feed their family or pay their rent, people around the world who live in more densely populated situations and communities, where physical distancing would actually is an aspiration, right? Not a reality. So even that physical distancing, we can look through that gratitude lens. And we can do this individually. We can also do it collectively, right? With our families, with our teams, sort of what are we grateful for? So I'm just, and on the note of gratefulness, actually, and sort of being grateful, so grateful to all of you for taking a little time out of your Saturday to join us today. So I'm just going to wrap it up and then we'll open it up to questions. So pain points, feeling overwhelmed or paralyzed. And we've got some tools here, that important and urgent prioritization matrix, and thinking about what's in our circle of control. Struggling with reinvention and some tools there, divergent brainstorming and scanning externally for reapplication opportunities or leveraging our internal strengths. Finding team leadership challenging and some tools there, embracing vulnerability, positive intent, and those head and heart check-ins, as well as sort of shorter cycle action planning and the morning huddle. And anxious about the future and the tools, be present, capture silver linings, and those pull forwards and some gratitude. So hopefully some of these pain points have resonated, and some of these tips and tools you'll find helpful. And we'll return to Oz and think about that maybe some of these things will help us put on our own ruby slippers and carve out our own yellow brick road into the future. So I'm going to hand it back to Julie now, and I think she's going to be moderating the questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Auster. That was very thoughtful, very insightful, very timely. I only wish that I had heard this lecture maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, because I can relate to every single point. And I'm grateful to you for taking time today.
Thank you.
So now it's the audience's turn. Please use the Q&A section or button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions you might have. And maybe I'll kick things off. Why is collective solutioning so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a big believer in collective solutioning, no matter what we're doing, any kind of change all the time. And for those students of mine who may be out there listening, you know, I sort of talk a lot about that. But I think particularly under these conditions of really rapid, tumultuous change, that collective piece is so important for generating the best ideas, for building commitment and passion, because our team is in there with us and we're all sort of fighting this together, and for execution, right? If we come up with an idea, we're more likely to be really excited about bringing it to life. So the collective solutioning piece, always important, but even more important now.
Thank you so much. So I have a couple of questions here. One is from Zoe Mitchell, or maybe Zoe Mitchell. How would you suggest encouraging leaders to start using things like gratitude in meetings?
You know what, I think some of it is about role modeling. So I'm going to talk about two things. One is just opening up meetings by saying things like, you know, I'm so proud of this team for how they rallied last week, or wow, you know what, we faced a lot of obstacles, and because some companies are facing over demand, right? And we're now ramped up, you know, 150%. So it's a leader sort of sharing gratitude, but then it might also just be doing one of those circles, right? And just having people share what are they grateful for. And you could even do an individual one and an organizational one. So you might say, talk about one thing in the organization or your team that you're grateful for and appreciative of, and then maybe something that's more individual to sort of build the relationships between the team members a bit more. Great question. Thank you for that.
I like that a lot. Anne Chung asks, how can leaders lead in the moment remotely? She works, I believe Anne is a female, she works in healthcare, and executives are not even at the hospital, and they're left holding the line.
Yeah, great question. And, you know, it is more challenging. I think having those real time, like, you know, if it's a fast paced industry in healthcare, for example, you may even be having those huddles a couple times a day because things may change overnight or during the day. So you could actually block times, you know, maybe every morning at 8:30, and then at 1 p.m. if you need to do it that often, and 5 p.m. you're doing those huddles and you're sort of checking in and saying, what's new, what's different, how do we pivot? How does that change our goals for this week or for later this afternoon, right? So I think really building in regular time blocks where people can connect. And if that's really hard, even doing one-on-one check-ins, right? So for the people on the leads of different things. So how's it going? What's changed today? What do we need to do differently? Another great question. Thank you.
Great. I've got a question from Camille Sonia Alexander. Is it possible to get a copy of the slides or notes on the presentation? So Camille, we are recording this, so you can rewatch it on Facebook for sure. If you follow our York University Alumni Facebook page, it'll be posted there. And we will put any like notes or any links, resources in the description on Facebook as well. So that, and you please share it with others that you think can benefit from this great information. Okay, I have a question from Andrew. I'm Andrew, I'm not gonna get your last name right, so forgive me. He says, hi Ellen, great presentation. I have a question regarding the urgent important matrix. Any advice on how to assess importance and urgency in a standardized way? My team works with a number of stakeholders who all assume their ask is high priority and high urgency.
Yeah, that's another great question. So in the short amount of time we had today, we didn't really break that down, but I think it is a really important question for any organization or team using that kind of matrix is how would you define urgent and important? So maybe what's important right now is lower risk, lower cost, sort of must have. Urgency, obviously, someone's got to make the call on what comes first. And so I think unpacking those words and asking what criteria are embedded in those words for your particular context is sort of the way to do that. I also want to mention you can layer those matrices onto each other. So imagine you take that first quadrant of now we have our most important and urgent tasks, and then maybe you do another matrix where you're sort of saying, risk and costs are now our criteria, or probability of success and impact are our criteria. So you can layer those on, and I'm happy to have a longer conversation about that on a email chat or something if you want to pursue that. Thank you.
I have a couple of great questions about helping others outside of a work context. Orietta writes, my 9-year-old son who watched your lecture is wondering how he can help his anxious grandmother feel calm.
Oh, so sweet. Thank you for sharing that question. You know, I think right now we have the opportunity with everybody at home. I don't know if the grandma is remote or the grandma is in the house, but we have the opportunity, we have more flexibility of time. And I think particularly the elderly are so isolated now. And so, you know, maybe it's setting up specific times to connect and even doing activities over the connection. So, you know, can you both work on the same coloring book or something? You're both and you're showing each other how you did it differently. I'm just trying to think of ideas off the top. Or can you maybe go to the kitchen and she teaches you how to bake cookies or something? So to think about if they're virtual or even if they're in your house, to really cherish this special time that we have in a way that we don't usually, you know, as you don't have to go to school now, so you have a bit more flexibility and thinking about things you can do, whether it's virtually or face-to-face.
That's great.
Great question.
Thank you for the tip. Thank you, Orietta, for the great question. I think we have time for one more. Just waiting for the audience here. Let me see. Sorry, I'm just going through our Q&A
Yeah, no problem.
now. You mentioned after-action reviews as one of the benefits of a huddle. Could you talk a little bit more about how those work?
Yeah. So after-action reviews, I'm a big advocate for in any kind of organization all the time, but it's basically asking what's working well, what didn't work so well, and what are our suggestions moving forward. And, you know, I think we should embed those in all projects and initiatives we do all the time, but particularly in this sort of era of ultra dynamic change. As we were mentioning, things pivot all the time. And so to be catching those learnings as we go, because we're doing so many new things and experimenting in so many ways. And so to take the time to sort of say, hey, we just tried that last week. Let's just take a minute and sort of say, what are the key learnings out of that? And when we move forward, or even if it's post-COVID, you know, it's just sort of capture it. How can we really leverage what happened and maybe embed it in other things or create a pocket of excellence around that? So Great question again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And that actually, we're to time, so that concludes our session. So thank you again, Dr. Auster. Very, very glad to have you with us today. Before I say goodbye to everyone in the audience, I do have...
Can I just jump in one more sec? Sorry, I just wanted to give a quick thank you to everyone and for all the great questions, and hoping that everybody has gained some tips and tools. I also want to mention we're going to post a link, I don't know if it's up yet, for some feedback, and this is new content, so would love your feedback. It'll also actually ask you about the pain points and tips and tools and which ones you found most helpful. And also just a few shout outs to Rebecca for inviting me, to my daughter Shannon, who really helped me shape this content in profound ways, to Raluca and Hassan for all their help with deck prep, to Julie, thank you so much for the awesome moderating today, to you, and to Ben, terrific handling of the logistics, and Grant for all his tech support. So I just want to do a few of those shout outs before we move on. Thank you. And and also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think that maybe will be posted as well, but feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or at my email address. Okay, so thank you
so much. Ben will make sure that all of that is posted too.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you again, and great shout outs.